Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Dr. Downey, and today we're going to be discussing how cardio is killing your gains. So the title is a bit of clickbait and was more intended to draw in views, but this is a video more about over-exercise and overtraining and how it's reducing your testosterone levels, or how it's actually proven to reduce your testosterone levels. The reason I use cardio is because most of these studies were done in endurance athletes, so there weren't many weight training studies, but we'll get into that. Furthermore, this video is more for non-enhanced athletes because if you're on exogenous testosterone, you don't really need to worry about testosterone so much. So this video is going to be split into two sections in one video. The first part is more opinion based, and the second half will look at the science. And yeah, so let's get into it. And just a disclaimer, I'm not saying don't do cardio. Actually, you should do cardio, and if I were to pick weight training or cardio for longevity, I'd pick cardio. But this is just more about overtraining and over-exercise. So the reason this topic came to mind in particular, it's because it kind of applied to me when I first started training. And it was due to this popularization of the push-pull leg split, which there is nothing wrong with. It's just if you're doing a push-pull leg rest, so 6 days on, 1 day off, that's far too much volume and far too much exercise in 1 week. And this will most likely result in a condition which we will discuss in the second half, in the scientific half of this video, called Exercise-Hypogonadal Male Condition. So this push-pull leg split, and I'm mentioning this in particular, but it's any split that does way too much volume and way too much frequency. Well, that's 6 days on, 1 day off. You can do push-pull legs and 3 days on, 1 day off, which is a much better idea. But anyway, I'm just using this as an example. So it was popularized by David Lade back in the day. I think it was him who popularized it. And my issue with it is more anecdotal. So I went from a 4-day split upper lower to trying the 6-day split when I first started training. So I felt fine on the split. I could complete my workouts. Recovery was fine, and I was training hard in each session. And I was making progress up into a point, and then suddenly I stopped making progress. I was bulking at the time, so it was odd that I stopped making progress, and I started to get extreme fatigue and these loss in libido and things like that. So obviously I went and got it checked out. I do have my blood results, which I'll show on the screen now. And to my surprise, well, no surprise actually, my testosterone levels, although were normal, were quite low. And what was more concerning was my free testosterone levels. So they were 274, and the range is 180 to 739. But if you're at if you're at the level of 250 with symptoms, that would be considered hypogonadal. So I had a training partner, and he wasn't experiencing any symptoms, and he got his blood test done, and to my surprise, his were actually lower than mine. I don't have his results, however. So it was just interesting to me. The issue was I didn't have a baseline. Which, again, this is why this is an opinion piece and should be taken with a grain of salt. It's just more of my rant on doing way too much volume. So I eventually went back to my upper-lower split, and I felt much better. It didn't have the symptoms again. And I'll show in future videos my testosterone levels and how they improved. But it was an observation at the time because I went onto these TRT forums because I was like, oh my gosh, I might need TRT, I'm not feeling good. And the majority of people on these forums are young individuals who train or weightlift usually quite a lot, like 6 days on, and they'll say that I'm training a lot and I don't know why I'm feeling like this or something like that. And they're on they're candidates for TRT. So it just made me think: is there a link between this doing too much volume or weightlifting with too much intensity too frequently? And even if you look at YouTubers on like YouTube fitness YouTubers, a lot of them coming out on TRT. And most of these individuals, I dislike the way they train because they train with far too often, with far too much frequency. And one of them was the guy called Ryan, I think. He came out saying he was on TRT, and I wasn't surprised about that because he trained more often, well, as often as I did, and I felt terrible. But obviously there are other variables to consider, like guys who train are more concerned about their health and will more likely get their results checked out and things like that, and people who are already hypogonadal, and yeah. So obviously I'm not saying this is more of a hypothesis than it is a theory. So yes, and don't get so defensive. I'm not attacking I'm more attacking doing too much volume, not the push-pull leg movement. Because a lot of people, when you say there's too much volume, they'll say, oh, but I can recover. But that's fine, because I felt I could recover, but do your hormones ever recover? Do you give it time for them to recover? And the science which suggests not. So let's move into the second half of this video, which is looking at the science and looking at this condition, which is the Exercise-Hypogonadal Male Condition. So this is the article I will be referencing. It's a review of just the literature, and I went into a few of the studies and they were quite interesting. And then we'll look at one study in particular which references weight training, because as I said, most of the studies done were on endurance athletes. So this exercise-hypogonadal male condition is actually not new to women. Obviously it's not specific to women, but the phenomenon is well established. It's called the female athlete triad, and I don't know why us males never thought we could suffer from a similar condition. So the female athlete triad is them having lack of a period or amenorrhea, and things like osteoporosis or bone mineral density problems, and there was another one, I think it was like disordered eating is part of it. So for males, I'll refer to this condition as EHMC. It's a constellation of different signs and symptoms and bone mineral density issues. So for this to be diagnosed, you need clinical hypogonadism with evidence of training. So it's not very specific because you could have had hypogonadism before training or something like that. But anyway, this is just how the condition is defined. So clinical hypogonadism is when you have low testosterone paired with these symptoms or signs, such as like the lack of bone mineral density, loss of libido, things like that. Because it's normal for some people to have low testosterone and have no problems, and then there's you don't really need to treat that unless they find it an issue. Although there is evidence suggesting that maybe you should treat it because of the increased risk of cardiovascular disease, but that's a topic for another video. So, as I said, this condition was actually first noted in endurance athletes, and in the studies they noted that individuals running more than 64 kilometers a week had significantly lower testosterone levels than individuals who are sedentary, so ones who are just sitting at home. And again, they tested individuals at the Ironman. I'm sorry, my bird's making noise. And these individuals at the Ironman, they tested 22 individuals, and only 9 of them had what we consider normal testosterone levels, although they were still quite low. The rest were hypogonadal and didn't know about it. So it's, as I said, it's well established in the literature that too much endurance training is linked to lower testosterone levels, even when calorie intake is corrected for. So, So it's obviously decreasing calorie intake does lead to lower testosterone levels, usually once you start reaching those lower body fat levels. But when corrected for, it's still proven that too much endurance training leads to low testosterone. So what about weight training? We know cardio is a problem, but what about weight training? And there's still not great evidence on weight training in particular, but they looked at doing at volume and things like that, and they discovered that volume might be a problem. So we'll reference this study, which was performed in individuals doing American football individuals in their off season. So in these individuals, they split their training up into 3 different phases, and in each of these phases, at the end of them, and for a baseline, they tested their strength, testosterone, and other hormones such as cortisol and stuff. But we'll focus on the strength and testosterone. So phase 1 was simply a 4-day training split of upper-lower body routine, so 4 times a week, and this is my preferred method. That's kind of what I do. So phase two consisted of weight training routine and additional conditioning, which was an added 3 sessions a week, which were 1.25 hours, and it consisted of a mixture of cardio and things like burpees and stuff like that, I think. So what did the results show? Well, if we look here, you can see there's this dip in testosterone on the 3rd test, and the 3rd test was done after the phase 2 of training, which was the training where they did too much exercise, and it was quite significantly decreased, and was, if you look at the level, it was around 17, which was the same as mine when I was overtraining. And if we look at their squat and their strength at the 3rd test, whilst it is better than baseline, it dropped from its peak after the 1st phase. So strength decreases. But the only positive was that their agility and sprinting had improved in this area, phase. So it kind of shows that not only is too much cardio an issue, but too much volume also is, and too many sessions a week of training. So it just shows that both volume and cardio should be used in moderation. And I'm not saying stay away from volume or cardio, just don't overdo it. And if your goals are purely strength or optimizing testosterone, you may want to reduce the volume and aerobic activity, but still keep it at a good level. So not only is too much exercise an issue, but they found it was a bigger issue when paired with a calorie deficit or inadequate rest, so rest between sessions, because it didn't allow for adaptation of the body, and that's what they found. And this is why it's commonly known that individuals who are dieting, as you get further into your diet, you reduce your volume, but you try the best to maintain your strength. And this is a great way to minimize the risk of getting this condition. But the problem I found is that none of these studies really quantified how much is too much. I mean, there was one study that said more than 64 kilometers a week is too much, but could it be, I mean, what about weight training and volume? How much volume is too much? And there are studies that show that, and I'll go through them in another video, but the studies have been linked to what is best for improving your training, not necessarily what's best for your testosterone levels. So how is it diagnosed? I did touch on it at the beginning, but it's when there's evidence of low testosterone, because just low testosterone itself is insufficient, but when it's paired with psychological symptoms such as low libido, erectile dysfunction, although that's also kind of goes into physiological conditions. So it's psychological and physiological problems, and the physiological could be the erectile dysfunction or bone mineral density problem. Erectile dysfunction kind of fits in both groups because sometimes it's psychological and sometimes it's physiological. So for those of you who are interested in endocrinology and things, you'd wonder, is this problem due to secondary hypogonadism, so a problem with the pituitary, or primary, where it's a problem with the testicles not producing enough testosterone? And the issue is they don't know. They couldn't do it in the study. They couldn't show it in the study. The results were mixed, and the problem was they didn't do frequent enough blood sampling because LH is kind of pulsatile, and you'd need to do blood tests like every 10 to 15 minutes to get an accurate level. But if we were to go off the female athlete triad, which I'd say is a similar condition except in females, that's more secondary, so it's a pituitary hypothalamus problem. So it could possibly indicate that this is more of a hypothalamus pituitary problem. And lastly, let's look at how it's treated. Well, there are obviously multiple aspects to consider, and before hopping on pharmacological treatment, one should employ lifestyle measures, such as reducing your volume to 4 days a week, because, 5 days might work. If 6 days, 7 days could work, depending on your volume. But it's 4 days, make sure your volume isn't too much. And in this study, in that study with the athletes, it showed that it boosted your level slightly. And I'm not saying don't do cardio. You should do cardio. Just do it in moderation with weight training, and at least do 150 minutes per week as recommended by the WHO. I think it's the WHO. Ensure you're eating enough. At least eat it at maintenance, and ensure you're getting enough micronutrients. There's no evidence to suggest that eating more protein would help, which is ridiculous. I don't know how protein would increase your testosterone levels. Sleep is well established to improve your testosterone levels, as well as sleep deprivation decreases skeletal muscle mass. And then if that still doesn't work, I would then consider seeing your doctor. So in summary, too much exercise is going to negatively impact your progress in the gym and your testosterone levels and possibly health with the bone mineral density problems. And I'm not saying don't do cardio, because you definitely should, and if I had to pick one or the other, I would do cardio purely from a health perspective, but I'm imploring you to do everything in moderation. Each individual is different, so it depends on you and what you're capable of. Don't push through it if you're not feeling good. And lastly, diagnosing this condition requires you to have this clinical symptoms also, not just the low testosterone. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a thumbs up, let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next one.